Hey everyone, welcome back to AK Academy with a new video about Blazor development. Today we have a very good one and a little bit, there's going to be basically a little bit of topic that we are going to cover in this video. So the main title, let's say, of this video is going to be the following. You are building a new Blazor app. Okay, we have passed across many tutorials and samples. But what if you are working on a big project or you are working alongside a team? Like, what is the best practices that you can follow while you are developing your components? So in that case, you can leverage the best out of your code and you keep it as clean as possible, as maintainable as possible. Because Blazor is a fresh technology. It's not like you cannot find too many books about that. So basically, while building my projects, I'm working in my company, I figured out that some guidelines that I follow, and I just want to share that with you. So let's get started with the 10 steps. But before doing so, I have just created this sample over here that we have this kind of button. So let's say our project, we use those buttons, okay? Like across your design, you have to use this kind of button. The first one called primary, secondary, outline, and it could be disabled. So we are going to go through developing this component that's very self-contained, very well structured. It could be used by anyone very easily and well documented. This is what you are going to do throughout this video while talking about the 10 tips and tricks that we are going to cover in this video, right? And we are going to give some little examples outside of those, but this is going to be our cover because having a sufficient component that covers all of this stuff is just basically a good starting point for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I have here a clear project called AKLab01. It just contains nothing, basically a new Blazor WebAssembly app using .NET 6. And right now we want to start, let's suppose this is your project and you want to start developing your components, and let's start with the first guideline that you should follow while basically thinking about developing your app, which is start putting your components within a Razor class library. So create a Razor class library project and then make sure to reference your components in your WebAssembly project. Why? Because you can keep your components separated. You have a clean project that's contained the component. They are reusable. They are they could be shared across other solutions. Maybe you can put this on NuGet or your internal feed, and basically it could be used by on other projects. Or you can put it on GitHub, so it could be shared by other people. And the other very important reason is that this is a WebAssembly project. Maybe you need right now, there is going to be a Maui project and there's going to be, let's say, a Blazor server project, and they are all giving you the same experience. So you can reference those components in any other project. So we're going to get started by doing this. So I will create a Razor class library. You can search on it over here or here. Next, I will call it aklab01.blazor.components. Let's hit next. Create, and here we go. So right now we have our project. Let's clean it a little bit by removing this component and remove this one as well. And I'll remove the GS that we have. So I just have it very clean. So here we go. Very good. So right now we can reference this project within this one. So I click add project reference, do this, and here we are good to go. Not fully good to go because we still have to mention the CSS and the JavaScript that we have to reference within the index.html. How we can do that? You can do that by basically adding a link for the style sheet, and you start by _content, because content means it is existing in one of your references. Either it's a NuGet package or you're referencing that as a DLL. You start by content, then the name of your assembly, Blazor.components, .styles.css. So right now you have basically access to the CSS isolation of your components. Like if you have here, we will have the button right now, and the button contains a CSS file only for the button. they can be referenced basically just like this. Okay, if you have an CSS over here existing in your www root, like an overall, you can also reference that just the same way. And over here you add like components / styles.css or things like this. JavaScript is also the same thing. You reference content, name of your assembly / the name of your file. This is all what you need to do. So we will save that. Right now our component has been mentioned, and let's go to the other to the guideline number 2. You should keep in mind a good structure for your folders and namespaces. So this one called components, but this is a fully project. Like you need helpers, you need extensions, you need sometimes other services that you can use. So basically you're not going to throw your components over here. You are going to put them within a folder called components as well. And this looks like a little bit weird, right? Like components and components. Okay, that's weird. So you need to maintain the namespace as well. So for example, some components, like if you want to create, okay, for the button, you're going to have one Razor file, but for other components like data grid, you're going to have 3 or 4 components that construct the full one, which is the data grid. So you are going to put that within a folder called data grid, just like that. And for our button, we are going to create a new folder as well, button. So right now we have a big hierarchy, so make sure that the namespace is not like this, because if you have a button, the namespace will be aklabs01.blazor.components.button. That's boring and very long, and you will have a lot of usings. So let's create our component and show you what I mean. I'll call this one an AK button, okay? And this is our component. But if I want to reference this component in the index page over here, I want to say AK component, you can see that we have a very long boring namespace that actually doesn't make sense. And if I remove that, I want to add this to the usings. So imagine you are using the button, the data grid, so everyone has a file, this is not practical at all. So what you have to do is for every component, give all your components a unique namespace, a general namespace, just like that, aklab01.blazor.components. So in this case, all your components, despite the hierarchy that you have over here, is going to be under this namespace. So what I can do, instead of mentioning that over here, I can go to my project and I can say .blazor.components, and here we go. I have access for this. So this is something very important. Keep your folders clean and very well structured, and make sure of the namespace so you don't have a lot of usings for every component, or like you have a weird names like components.components. So make sure of this one. This is the step number 2. Right now we are going to move to the step number 3, and basically this one is going to be about the code and the code behind and the design and the styling of this button. So the first thing that you should do is basically create a code behind file. Don't write C# in this code for many reasons. The first reason is that this file is going to be big, which is something that we don't like. The second thing is that this file is actually the Razor. It is the UI implementation of the component. So basically, yeah, it doesn't make sense to have C# over here unless like it's 2 or 3 lines. The other reason is that the IntelliSense and the coding experience of C# over here is bad if you compare it to the code behind file when you have the full C# code editor experience. So you can do that by click over here and click extract the block to code behind, and here we go. You have right now a code behind file, which is basically referencing this button over here. So let's run the main project just to make sure that our project is working fine. So okay, here we go. So our component is working very fine. So right now, let's think about the design and the styling and the parameters. Like those are multiple steps at once. So this one is basically a button, right? And we need a styles, CSS. So what we have to do is we have multiple options. Either we have a general styling available over all our components, like an app like general style available in your www root folder, or maybe you can use like some preprocessors like Sass and stuff like this. But this is out of the scope of this video. We are going to use CSS isolation for this one, just because we are going to focus into a single component and not the application overall. So to add a CSS isolation for your CSS file only for one component, which is isolated from other ones, you can right click on your folder that you have your class in or your component and search for CSS style sheet, and you call it the same name of your button, aka button.razor.css. And here we go. Right now we have a style available for this one. I'm going to add a very basic button over here, and I will add some style. Sorry. And if I run the app just to make sure that this one is working. Okay, the CSS styles is working, which means the index.html, you have to reference that correctly over here. Other than that, those are not going to work. Make sure that you have content / the name of your namespace .styles.css. So right now, this styles available over here is actually scoped only to this button. So make sure that you have to use the right classes, the right styles. This is from a CSS perspective to avoid working with to avoid the caching problem. So for example, instead of having a button over here with all the style that's mentioning the exact color and the exact, like a button for example like this, and margin top, let's say 5 pixel and stuff like this, what you can do is that you can have those as a classes, maybe in a separated class, or you're using already a framework like Tailwind, or even Bootstrap is having this. When you say like MT1, and here you say margin top, for example, like 3 pixel and stuff like this. So in your code, you mentioned the class name. So this class doesn't contain colors or stuff like that. So you have MT1, 2, 3, 4, depends on your usage across all. And then this will reduce the caching. We're going to have a very long session about this one, but this is just like a general tip. For example, if you go over here and you go to my Blazor, you can see that it offers you some CSS utilities as a classes. So the class doesn't contain a full design, like space that contains everything, padding and margin and stuff like that. No, it's just like if we go to spacing, here we go. So you can say that there is a class PA4, which is padding all sides for 4, or margin right 16, stuff like that. So this is a very highly recommended approach that you can follow that reduces the possibility of getting into a caching problems. But right now, having this CSS file only for the button is working good. We are not going to focus a lot on CSS, but we want to get our file up and running and our component is working very good. This one covers all the scenario and written in a very good way. So what we will be doing is we will create the style that we have over here. So I will copy this to not waste a lot of time. And we have over here a button, and it doesn't have a border. It has a very fixed padding. This is just up to you, just to show you the example, but in reality, like every case is different than the other one. Have a very slightly border radius, and with a cursor pointer and the transition 0.3 seconds. So whenever we hover the mouse or change the state of the button, like we get a little bit animation. And we have the hover enabled. This one that actually makes, as you can see, gray whenever we hover over. This enabled means if the button is disabled, it's not working, as you can see. So let's bring it as well. And then we have this primary style, which is the blue background and the white color. We have the secondary. It is just the opposite, white and blue. And we have the outline, which is this one, which has a border and the transparent color with And at the end we have the disabled class, which is make the cursor as you can see, and the opacity of the button is 0.5. So make it like that. So right now we have the classes. As I've said, this is not the best practices to have them. It depends on you, on what the framework that you are using. For example, if you're using CSS, all the stuff is available for you as a classes, CSS classes. So you don't have to write your own CSS. Everything is managed for you. But in case you do, I have done that for this sample, and we are going to see how we can manipulate that or even write that inline in a very clear way. Like inline, I mean in the component itself. But right now we have those. Let me try to say class primary, just to see how this one is going to work and to make sure that our file is working fine. Okay, so this is the problem of caching I've talked about. Okay, sorry, we have to put on primary, just like that. Here we go. So it's looking very good right now. We have this button. Actually, let's try to change the class by using the browser DevTools, and I'm going to say over here secondary. Here we go. Let's use the outline. Outline. Nice. And if we use the disabled, of course it's a primary disabled. Very nice. But of course all the button has to be disabled. So for example, disabled. There we go. Very good. So right now we have the styles ready for us. This is a good approach. Make sure you have your CSS available over here, and it's up to you. It's not bad or right, but the better that you have your CSS isolated, it's going to make your life like a little bit easier, as you can find the styles for every component for itself. So right now we have covered creating a Razor class library, the structure of the project and the namespaces, creating a styles. Right now we go to the fourth important aspect, which is the parameters. So this component has to be, the way that you should use this component, first of all, it has to be flexible. I shouldn't, like, every time I want to change something is to go create another instance of this component, but I should have a very good meaningful parameter that allows me to manipulate the behavior or the view of this component very easily. So I will go to the code behind file and see what we can do. So if I open up this, okay, so if you think about that, what is the first, like, if I want to have this button like fully flexible, I can use it all over the place. First of all, I need to define, from what you have seen, that I have 4 or have 3 states. So why not we create those states? So basically we create them as an enum. I will go ahead and create an enum over here. Button style, and I will have it as a primary, secondary, or outlined. Okay, so let's accept this as a parameter first. So parameter public button style. And to reduce the code that I should write to call this one, like I want to make this primary, I don't have to say button style equals primary. I can make our life a little bit easier and add a default value for this one. So what this one is going to give to me, by just having the button like this, it will take the primary style by default, which is very good. This is the first parameter. Make sure that your parameter is very flexible. The other parameter that we need is the text of the button. So let's accept a text. Okay, I'll make this one nullable because we are on .NET 6 and nullability is enabled over here. Another component that we need, another parameter, sorry, that we need is, what if we need an icon? Like I want to, beside the button, I want to have an icon. So I can accept an icon, right? Of course, it is nullable as well. There we go. And What else do we need? Let's think about that. Let's add a property that says full width, which means that, like, for example, this one. Here we go. So we have a button that takes the full space of the div that he is inside. So I will add this property that calls parameter public pool is full width. That's very good, right? We have now the other two parameters that we need. What if the user wants to add classes or styles by himself, like he wants to override the existing one? We need to give him the flexibility. I mean the user of the component, which is going to be a developer. So we need to give the user the flexibility to add his own classes and styles. So what we can do is we create a type of parameter. This is a special one in Blazor. It's going to be of value dictionary string object. I'll call user attributes. Get and set. Give it new. And this parameter we say capture and matched values equals true. So what this is going to do, if I basically said, like, sorry, not here, over here, if I said style. So this is an HTML property that doesn't have a compatible parameter available for me on this button, right? I don't have a style property over here. So this one is an HTML. So by doing this, and you're saying capture and matched values, those one will be captured, like style, class, or any other property that you need to add that's available as an HTML, attribute, all of those that's available for you in the DOM. So what we can do is we can accept them like this: dictionary string object, string because the attribute name is always string, but the value sometimes it's a number, sometimes it's string, so it's an object, and we call them user attributes, and make sure to add this one. This is a very, very important step that you should follow, because in this case you give the user the flexibility. Okay, this is the design I have, but I want to add the margin top for this one. What should I do? Should I put it in a div? No, like he can just directly add his own style, margin top, without breaking your component, which is very good. So this is why we are capturing all other parameters that they are actually, that we couldn't guess, and to give him the flexibility to add styles and classes. So very good. Here we go. This is how we capture the parameters, as you can see. So before we move on, we still have only one parameter, very important one actually, which is event callback on click. Of course, we need the on click of the button event to be handled. And another one, sorry for that, parameter public pool is disabled, to make sure. So look at that. We have right now a variety of components that's actually very good, and it covers most of our cases, and they are all having a default value. Like this one is false, this one is null, this one gives you a primary, very good. This one is also false. That makes sense. Now, another step that is very important, but before talking about that, let's implement the design of this one over here. So I will basically have the button. So we have we have button, we have the class, we have button and primary. So what we need to do with this one, for example, we need to add if, like string is null or white space, like the icon. Sorry, if it's not, then over here we should use an icon, and I'm going to use the font awesome for now. So let me go ahead and add the font awesome. This is the CDN. I will copy this. Okay, let me go to index.html. Let me add this just like that. Very good. So right now we have font awesome embedded, so we can use the icons of the font awesome, and it's going to be FA, icon. So in this case, we added it just in case icon wasn't null. If it's null, then there's going to be no icon. And the other thing that we are going to do is the text basically of the button, which is going to be just text, just like that. Very basic, and it works very fine. Right now, what other properties do we have? Text, icon, button style. Okay, button style, we need to control the classes that we put over here, right? So this is going to be another step or another guideline that you should follow. We need to capture the user attributes. Like when the user put a style or a class, maybe in your component there is a dev and dev and dev. In this case, it's a one element, which is the button, but you can have more. So what we can do is we can say add attributes equals user attributes, just like that. So right now we are capturing all of this, and we have the basic icon and text. So let's see how our button actually works right now. I'm going to say text equals first primary button, and icon. Let's see what font awesome icons available. Awesome icons. So let's pick the like. Okay, here we go. So let's choose this one. Circle heart. Okay, very good. Okay, this is how we use it. If I sold, if I circle heart. Okay, I'll just copy this part. And I will paste it over here. Sorry. Let's see here. Circle heart. Let's see if this one actually works. Okay, we don't have the icon that actually didn't show up. Let's do inspect element and figure out what went wrong with this one. So this is our button over here, and if we expand it, we can see that here we have already the icon. The reason why it didn't show up is that, let's try to use, what version I'm using over here? 6.1. Okay, that's right. I'm on the right one already. So let's try to use, for example, heart. Only heart, maybe. Oh, here we go. So that icon didn't exist, so we were unlucky. So that's good. Look at that. We have right now the icon. Let's try to use it over here in a better way. So let's do that. Run the project one more time. So we have the heart, and it is working very fine, as you can see. But what we need to do is actually we need to give, whenever there is an icon, we need to give it like a little margin right. So there is a, just like that. So we have this, and okay, I'm gonna say margin right 3 pixels. Maybe we need more. Okay, 10 pixels here. So we will do it like that. Go to that button. Here we go. I will add it in line. That's okay. 10 pixel. Okay. Very good. So you have seen the basics of how we create stuff like that. So right now, let's move to another step, which is using how we can manipulate the classes and the styles like dynamically. So over here, you need to make sure that if you need to pass a primary in case the button style is a primary, and secondary, and so on, and maybe there is some other classes and style that you need to manipulate in case, like in this case, for example, disabled. So if the button is primary, it's going to be button, sorry, let's put those together. You need to have a button, a primary, and disabled. And you need disabled over here as well. And if it's only primary, so you need button primary, you don't need disabled. So to manage the classes in this way, there is already a very powerful NuGet package available for you. It's called Blazor component utilities. This one, it's widely used and it has some powerful classes that's actually going to make your life very, very simple. So let's see how we can use it. So I need right now those classes. I remove them, and because they are dynamic, as I've said, they are not fixed. So sometimes maybe you're going to make button and then you'll add some if statements. If not, mention some stuff like this and some C# with, okay, so that's like a very bad approach and it's very hard to read. So let's go and create a private string button classes, and I will make it a read-only property, and I will use what's called a CssBuilder. Let's use this component. So CssBuilder allows you to add the classes you want with in a very like dynamic fashion. So I will say add a class. So what is the name of the class? It's button. Very good. The other class I want to add is a primary, but I want to add the primary only if the button style is a primary. So what I do, I have an amazing parameter over here called when. So when button style equals primary. If it's not primary, don't add it. So I'm gonna use Ctrl+D to clone the button. So we want to add secondary only if it's secondary. I want to add outlined only if it's outlined, right? And I want to add the last one, disabled, only if it's disabled. Not button style is disabled is true. So if it's disabled is true, add this one. If not, just remove it. And at the end of this, just call the function build. So right now you have this button classes. Whenever any of those changes, this one, you will have a set of classes will be changed, and then we will reference this over here. So look at that. That's very clean and clear, right? No if statements, no nested code, no too many lines. Everything is very clear, and as you can see, very, very readable. Add a class, button. Add a class primary when button style is actually primary, and so on and so forth. Maybe you can have hundreds of classes. It's okay. You can manage them like magic over here. So this one is very, very important and very powerful as well. So make sure you actually have it. This is one of the best steps. It's not only CSS. There is also classes, and there is also a StyleBuilder. We are going to use it in a bit. So what about let's say we have also the disabled. Yeah, so let's say here disabled equals is disabled. Brilliant. So let's see what we get over here. If I go over here and I say I have this button, I will clone it multiple times, and then I'll say first secondary one, but say button style equals button style dot secondary. Let's use like to see if it's available. And for this one, I don't need, this one is outlined. Outlined button. I don't need an icon. And the last one is going to be the same for the last one, but I will say is disabled equals true. So look at that. This will be very good. So right now, I will add, let's run the project and see what we have. look at this, exactly what we wanted to achieve, right? So right now we have a very lovely component called AK button. It's fully flexible. As you can see, I can control its design by just like publishing this one or this property, and boom, like everything gets changed just like instantly, which this is very good, right? You have the icon. If you read that, it's very readable, right? Like text, button style, icon, no text. There's going to be no icon if this one is not there. Is disabled true. Everything is working very well. So just one more thing before we move on. We said we are going to capture the user attributes, but we have a case when it's highly recommended that you should most of the time have this, but when the user wants to pass his own classes or styles, make sure to add those as an explicit parameters, like parameter string class, and here style. So the question here comes is why? Like, why I should ask for a class and a style if I'm already capturing this from over here? So if you noted that we already have a class, right? What if the user adds another class by himself? This is going to be a conflict. Two class attributes has been added. So what we should do is that we allow him to enter his classes over here, and then we embed those classes at the end by typing dot add class when string dot is null or white space class is not, sorry. So add the classes of the user when this one is not null. So basically we have only one and we are still on the same place. Our code is still clean and there's going to be no conflict. A style is going to be the exact same thing. What we can do over here, we already right now need a style. We want to use the style builder just to show you that. We have a property called is full width. What this one is going to do is that it's going to make our button 100% width. So instead of adding this as a class, I will add it as a style just to show that for you. So what I will do, private string style, sorry, button style builder. So this class, I love it. So add a style width. Right now you pat the value, it's 100%, but when and only when is full width is true. Sorry, this one is a read-only property and it's not a variable because we cannot access the parameters if it's full width. Just like that. So if you noted this, right now we have also a style. So this one will give you the following result. If there is full width, it will be just like that. And you can add as many styles as you want. They are all will be managed the same way. Like this style builder and CSS builder is just like magic. So we'll go to the button over here and we'll say style equals add button style. And I will add another style, which is the style of the user in case he added any. So if string is null, or oh yeah, we cannot add it over here because this one takes property and key, but the user will pass them as a consecutive string. So what we can do is that add a space and say style. So the style of the user will go over here and our style will go over here, and there will be a space in between. Very good. Let's see what do we get until now. So right now we have a class, look at that, and we have a style. So I will add a class says empty4. Those classes are provided by Bootstrap. So you can say I pass a style directly, and I will add, sorry, a class. And for this one I will add border 3 pixel orange, solid orange. I can do that, right? Very good. So let's run this. So here we go. The style has been taken, right? And if I open, I should see MT4 available for me over here, which is the margin top. It has been taken, and the style of the user also has been taken. Let me use is full width just to see what I'm going to get. I'll go to index, and I will make this button is full width equals true. Brilliant. Look at that. That's very good. It's working very fine. So if I go and click inspect one more time, you can see style width 100%. So the style builder is fine, and you should always think about that whenever you want to manage the styles and the classes on your component, and don't use the if else or your own management way. This one is very good, very readable, and easy to understand. So we have achieved a lot. Let's move to the second step or guideline, which is the comments. Comments is something, it's valued for some programmers, but it's not for the other one. So when you are developing things like component, keep in mind that comments is something very precious, especially they are working with a team. So you are developing this button. You don't have 3 developers to work on this button, so 1 is enough. So you have written this button, but you need it to be well written in a way that other people will understand what does that mean. So you should use this kind of comment when you say like that. So this one is very important for you when you come to the code later on, but for the other developers who are going to use this component. So you can say defines the general style of the button, primary, for example, equals blue background with white color, and etc, etc. So you describe it in your own way. Maybe there is like a link for available values C, and you pass the button style enum. We cannot pass an enum over here. Okay, you can have a link for example, the designs of your Figma or Adobe XD or whatever it is, so your users is able to read that. This one is very important, this summary comment, not because it's like the user will open it, but actually it will tell the Visual Studio what's going on. Like if you hover the mouse over button style, you can see that define the general style of the button, primary, and etc, etc. So this is very important, especially when like some parameters are very well like self-descriptive. Text, okay, it's the text of the button, but what about the icon? If I open up this button and I say icon, what if I don't want an icon? So it's very good to explain how this one works, like set an icon on the left hand side of the text and you pass a note that if the value is null, if you don't need an icon, if icon is not needed, by default it is null, or if it's null, the icon won't be shown, or stuff like this, just to you explain the behavior of how it works. So other developers, when they type a keep button, okay, they see that, okay, look at that, they are very readable. I go to the icon. Okay, what if I don't have an icon? Is there like with icon? No. What if I read the icon? Okay, if I leave it null, so it's going to be no icon, which is good. This is what I'm aiming for. Okay, so keep in mind that comments is something very precious. We still have on a click. Oh, we forgot to program on a click, by the way. So we need to say here on a click equals on a click. So the event callback will be fired whenever we click this button. So the user can pass their own functions to that. So right now, all our parameters working fine. We have added some comments to describe how they are working. These are all best practices that you can follow while doing work, okay? So we have covered some good stuff. Right now, let's move to another step or guideline, which is the inheritance. You can use inheritance actually to make your components, to make your life just, it will add some value. For now, like not too much in our case, but in real projects, when you have a bunch of components, it's very important that you make all your components inherit from one thing, and you add the most common properties and functionalities on that parent. So let me do that. I will go in the components, I will create a class, I will call it AK component base. And the component, of course, let's modify the namespace as we have agreed on. Get public, and it should inherit from component base. It's not going to be Razor because it is just like this one is just a class where I'm going to put the shared stuff. But to make it a component, I have to inherit from component base. What I'm gonna do is I will take, for example, this user attributes. We'll put it here because it's a common property that's needed in every component. I will take the classes and the style because it's also needed in every component, whether you are developing a card, a data grid, or a button, or an alert, everything you need to allow the user of that component to pass a class and a style. So using the inheritance in this way is something very important, right? You have them all, and whenever you want to work, go ahead and inherit, say AK component base, and in the Razor file as well, type inherits AK component base, and look at that. Right now we have a little bit less code, not too much, because not too much shared, but when you have a lot of components, for example, isBusy indicator, it's almost used in every component. So you pass it in the parent, like you have the style and class, that they are always available for you whenever you inherit, and all your components are inherited from the same type. So you can do some bulk operations, or maybe later on if you want to use the reflection, stuff like that. This is a little bit important to keep in mind whenever you basically develop a bunch of components. This is a very good approach that you should follow. Right now, the other step we want to talk about is the services. Our button right now is doing very good, and we have developed it successfully. So right now we are going to move away of it. We are going to we have another component that's communicate with the server, okay, through an API. So it's highly recommended not to keep this component based on, for example, HttpClient, or based on such a service that's not abstracted, where you cannot actually mock what's going on inside. So let me create let's go and take the weather forecast as an example. Fetch data.razor. So look at that. Here we have the weather forecast. Weather forecast is depending on HttpClient. This one, based on the projects I've built, this one is a very bad experience. Like you cannot, testing this component is going to be a little bit hard. This is number one. Number two, if you want to mock this component in some cases, like you want to just feed it with not real data, it's going to be hard to do so, right? But what you can do with that, we can take HttpClient out of that, and we can use an abstracted service. I will take this as an example because I don't want to create another components and stuff like that. I just want to show you the idea that don't be based on HttpClient. Other than that, try to be based on services. I will create a services folder, and I will create an interface. I'll call it weather forecast service. Like that. I will create an interface exactly on the same file. Okay, and then we'll make this one. So I will take, this one will actually, it will retrieve a weather forecast array for me. So what I will do, task weather forecast object, okay, array, fetch weather async, like that. And then I will implement this over here. So right now I have an abstracted layer of this service, so I don't care. Let me take this to another file so you don't get confused. So right now I have iWeather forecast and weather forecast service. So I will take the code that communicates with the HTTP client. So I need to inject HTTP client. Let me do that. Okay, I will create a generate constructor. Okay, I have injected that. Very good. The other thing to be used is to make the call to the server and retrieve the data, the same they are doing over here. So let me take that. And say return. Okay, so right now we have the service, and which is fully separated. It's just a service that contains code that talks to the HTTP client. I don't need in every component to check for the status code and handle the errors of the API. I do that in a separated C# file. And what I do over here, instead of doing this, is I will inject iWeather forecast service. Okay. And I'll say weather forecast service. I'm not sure of the word forecast. Maybe yeah, there is an E over here. I missed it. Okay, I'm going to rename that. So weather forecast service dot fetch weather async. So look at that. Right now, no more HTTP client code. This one is fully self-contained, and it's just based on this interface where I can mock easily. And I'm going to show you that in a second. Right now, let me first rename this by hitting Ctrl-R twice. For the same over here. Very good. So the other thing I'm going to do is go to program.cs and register our service. Builder.services.add scope iWeather forecast. Sorry, iWeather. Sorry, it's iWeather forecast service. Okay. Just forget the name of my service I just created. Weather forecast service. And here we go. Sorry, let's save that. And let's try to run the app one more time. I should get the exact same results, but the code that talks to the API, and it depends on, okay, here we go. You see, I get the exact same data, which is expected, but right now, my code that talks to the API is existing over here. I can mock this one very, very easily. So right now I'm testing. My API is not available for me. So what should I do? What I'm going to do is I will create a mock of that data. So what I will do is say demo weather forecast service. Okay. And I will just implement this one. I will return task. But from result, new weather forecast, date equals datetime.now, summary, cloudy, temperature, C. We do that. So how easy is that? Actually, I can go to program.cs. I'll duplicate this one, demo. So look at that. I don't change my component. I just change the injected service, and I will get right now the result I want. It took me just 1 minute to mock the data I want to do. Right? Look at that. That's very good. This is what I'm looking for. So this is also a very, very good approach that keep in mind. Don't make your components based on a classes that actually couldn't be or not abstracted in a way that you cannot mock or unit test those services. So keep this in mind. This is a very important step that you should follow. One more thing, which is the last thing I want to talk about, it's going to be just theoretical. I'm not going to implement anything, but because this is a very big topic, I would like to have a long video about, which is the lazy loading. What is lazy loading? Actually, this is something interesting has been introduced in .NET 6, which is when the Blazor app runs, it goes ahead and installs all the required DLLs with the WebAssembly, right? So sometimes you need a component that's being used only once and in a page that's actually not frequently visited, and it's big. So in this case, you can have this component in a separated Blazor class library project, and you don't install this component with the other project when it's basically initialized on the client in the browser of the client, but it's being requested whenever you navigate to the page that includes this component. So this is a very important approach. So how you should handle this, like what you should do. So for this kind of components that's a little bit heavy, rarely to be used, or like it's not frequently navigated to, not always, what you do is that you create this component in a very separated DLL outside your components and your Blazor app, and then you can set it up through lazy loading. I'll mention the link in the description below from the documentation of Microsoft, how you can implement that, because we are going to have a long session about this later on that actually shows you how we can implement that. But the documentation is going to help you. So you have it in a separated project and contains only this big component, and then you enable lazy loading over here by like lazy loading or enable lazy loading. I don't remember what was that. So, and you mentioned the DLL, and whenever you're using that component, it will be downloaded only at runtime when you are navigating to that page. So this was the last step. We will have a big video about that, but just to keep that in mind, big component, rarely used, put it in a separated Blazor class library, and keep lazy loading in mind to have your data. This was everything for today. I know that it was a long session, but hopefully it was like important to you and you get the benefits out of this. While you are developing your apps, you keep those guidelines in mind, and hopefully those are going to help you. You can find the link of the current repo on GitHub. I'll put the link in the description box below. And this is everything basically. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and even share if you can. And thank you so much.